green tea in honor of our Cha Day. Welcome back, everyone. So I'm going to assume that you've already watched the replay or been in the live class for today, our fifth session, April 21st, Air Day, Cha Day. And this is your supplemental air video. Before I get into the slides, and I've already read to you from Layne's book, Chakra Meditation, during the live class, so you'll see that in the replay. Before I go into the slides, one thing I wanted to say about today's final rhythm, the pinnacle rhythm, which is two rhythms, Genmai Cha and Matcha, the two green teas together. The first one filled with cha. Cha, remember, is Japanese for tea. First one is filled with ta, the second one is filled with tea. Talk. So I had said you can play them one at a time. You can play them one after the other. You can play one of them 4 times and then the next one 4 times and go back and forth. And certainly here you have an opportunity for ticka-tickas or a drum roll or the shake, as we learned today. And I said the best way to remember how to play them together, strung along, like one and then the next one following. So it starts with this line and then it continues to this line. Of course, you can have half of your circle playing this one and half of your circle playing that one, or one person playing this one and one person playing that one. If you want polyrhythm, more than one rhythm happening simultaneously all at once together. But I'm thinking that this is the sentence and this is the sentence continued. And I said in class the best way to do that is to notate it, but then I don't know that I showed you. So on your most current notation chart, what I was suggesting is that the first rhythm goes here in the first half of the line, and then the second rhythm goes here. Normally, I suggest that you write your rhythm here and then write it repeated, so that here in the center, between the 4 and the 1 and, right here in the center, you see how a rhythm ends and then begins again. Now we have Genmai Cha, the first rhythm here, followed by the matcha rhythm. So what you end up seeing on your notation chart is how Genmai Cha ends and how it begins. And you can see on this chart, Genmai Cha, cha tick tick cha cha, talk, sorry, cha tick tick cha cha tick talk tick. It ends with a talk tick. And then you go into lots of talks here. So it ends with talk, tick, talk, talk is how it begins. So when you write it on your chart and you look at that center spot where you have that faint line written down the middle of the entire line, right here you're going to see talk, tick, and then at the 4 and you'll see talk tick written, and then at the 1 and you'll see talk talk written. So you might want to iron out the wrinkle of how a rhythm ends and the next one begins by just playing talk tick talk talk. And then take a breath. Talk tick talk talk. Talk tick talk talk. Talk tick talk talk. Try that a little bit, and then you can add on to it. You can add on here and you can add on there. Add a note from the end, add a note to the beginning. And the reason why I say take a breath is so that you don't get in a habit of just playing the end to the beginning over and over and over and over again, because that creates a habit in and of itself. And what you're trying to do is end a rhythm and start a rhythm, but there's more to the entire sentence than just repeating the end and beginning. So hopefully that's clear and that helps you with today's rhythms. So we did the Brahmari breathing today. How was that for you? And remember, you want to take the hum, start with your mouth open, and then as you close your lips, bring the hum to a higher note and constrict further and further up your throat until you're constricting just in the back of the throat. So constrict further and further up the neck, I should say, until you're constricted at the top of the throat and with a higher note. And what you ultimately get is not just the vibration in the bones, but as Layne pointed out, some overtones, and that is more than one note than the actual note that you're hitting. There are some multiple notes that start singing. That's what overtones, as I describe them, are. And all of this relates to the buzzing of bees, the Brahmari Devi. I showed you that before, but I'll show you her again. The Brahmari Devi, bee goddess of the Hindu tradition, and the buzzing of bees and that pranayama breathing practice that relates to her. Layne said that it actually improves hearing by vibrating all the tiny bones in the skull. And you know, a lot of these plates in the skull are actually just knitted together, and they're meant to be not adhered like glue, but meant to have some movement. And that's why when we go to a cranial sacral practitioner, they're able to just kind of gently move those platelets in the skull. So she said that this Brahmari practice and its vibration improves hearing, and that students in India are taught Brahmari to quiet the mind, the busy, buzzy thoughts of the mind. And therefore it also helps with listening. See, that's why I thought, and I said it at some point, I don't remember if it was during class or if it was in the hangout session afterwards when we were chatting. And those hangout sessions are fabulous, everyone. So I encourage you to check those out. It's really a lot of wisdom takes place, and questions and answers. But I thought that the fourth chakra and the buzzing of the bees and the umphalos and the bindu and all of that that is related had to do with hearing, had to do with sound, you know, air, and the flutes and the birds that came in today in our ritual sharing. Those were beautiful. And so I will actually go on to share with you what the nature of we will be talking about today. We have actually the birds. I have two of them on the screen. Let me show them to you. We have two bird goddesses. They're not the same size on the screen. I'm not sure why, but that doesn't seem to change it. So the goddess on the right with her frame drum has the upper half of her body as a woman and the lower half as a bird. And the one on your left, the left side of your screen, has the head of a bird. She's got a frame drum in her hands, and the lower half of her body is a woman. So we'll be looking at the birds, and then, of course, the bees. The birds and the bees. And we had bee energy and bird energy today in our class, and the beautiful flutes that were shared, and the feathers. All that energy to me is air. And humans learned to sing and invented the flute because they were listening to bird song. And the buzzing of the bees relates to the frame drum. So I want to go into this for a moment. This is invoking Aphrodite. And as we look at the words, I'll also play the music for you. And I encourage you to read along as Layne is reading from the sacred text, keeping in mind that those last 5 words are Layne's own. Turn up your volume if you need to.
Leave Crete, come here, come to the holy place, come to the sacred grove. Your altars are smoking with incense. Cold water sings through the fruited trees. Everything is shaded under the bower of roses. And from the shimmering radiance of leaves, an enchanted sleep drops down. Here is a meadow of spring flowers where horses graze, and the soft wind gently breathes. Come, Aphrodite, pour your nectar into our golden cups. In grace, make the libation. Bring your Melissas to life.
So beautiful. And that is, of course, from Layne's CD, Invoking Aphrodite. If you can see that here, I know I'm sharing the screen still, but if you can see it on the part that's showing me, Invoking Aphrodite. And it was written by Sappho from her sacred texts. And Jen reminded me that Sappho lived on the island of Lesbos, which the term lesbian comes from. This was an island of women. And that she was a poet and musician, composer, teacher, and priestess of Aphrodite in the 7th century BCE. And that she created a community of women writers and singers and dancers. And Aphrodite being a bee goddess, one of the bee goddesses, her priestesses played the frame drum. And all of the bee goddesses that I named before in class today, which you'll see in the replay if you weren't in class, are all associated with the frame drum. Not necessarily with the bees, but with the frame drum. Or did I say that they were all associated with bees? Yeah, they're all ancient bee priestesses, and those are all bee goddesses. Aphrodite, Artemis, Cybele, Demeter, Persephone, and Neith, all associated with the frame drum as well. So, thank you, Jen, for reminding me of the history of Sappho. And if you want to know more, you can Google her, find out more about her. There's quite a bit known, I believe, because she was a writer herself. So any of the writing would hopefully still be available. So this was written by her, and then Bring Your Melissas to Life is what Layne added, and reminding you that Melissas are the bee priestesses, as are the Deborahs. I know that here, cold water sings through fruited trees, and Layne added the word the in her recitation, but the word the was not in her liner notes, and that's what I was copying. So if you noticed that, that's what's going on. So what Layne later came to believe was that what they were calling for was not necessarily just Aphrodite, but that they were actually calling forth the bees. That on Crete they were saying to the bees, or on Cyprus, they were actually on Cyprus, or where Sappho was, on Lesbos. Leave Crete, they got plenty of bees. Come here, come to this holy place. We have a sacred grove. We've got the incense, so smoking and beekeeping. Smoke was used for beekeeping probably in those days as it is today. There are fruited trees, so there are fruits that are falling to the ground and rotting, and you know how bees love those. Everything is shaded under the bower of roses, flowers. Here is a meadow of spring flowers. So here are the flowers for you to pollinate and collect your pollen and make honey, and and pour your nectar into our golden cups. Honey, think honey. Make the libation. Maybe they were making honeyed libations. We've seen a lot of those libation bowls in recent slideshow presentations with the umphalos in the center, the buzzing beehive of the umphalos. Bring your Melissas to life. Oh, Layne, boy, you were really onto something, and this is what keeps me up so late at night going through this stuff and getting so excited to share with you. So here we have Layne's color plate of the fourth chakra. To break it down for you a little bit, you see two triangles. I want to bring your attention to these two triangles. The triangle that points upward, representing the yang energy and the masculine, the phallus, the erection, upward movement, up and out. And then the downward facing triangle, the pointing downward, which represents the feminine, the yoni, the vulva, pointing down to the vulva, pointing down to Mother Earth, the yin inward energy. So we have the sacred masculine with the sacred feminine. And together they create this hexagram. This four-sided, this four-pointed star creates inside it a hexagram. Do you see that? Okay. And then inside that is the sacred yoni, from where all life comes, and the bindu, the compacted, unmanifested sound that buzzes like the hive, like the umphalos, before all of creation is manifest, because it resides in the frame drum of the goddess and her priestesses, and with one stroke of her drum, with one beat of her heart, all creation is made manifest. So that's what we see here, and a 12-petaled lotus, which is 6 twice. So why is the number 6 so important? I think I might have even closed this out already. Let me bring this up again. Screen share is a little cumbersome on Zoom. So here you have the close-up of a bee in the hive with these little cells filled with honey. Check out the hexagrams. So it is symbolic of the beehive and the honeycomb. And bees, these diligent worker bees, and the queen bee, there's so many studies that have been done about bee energy. I mean, not only are the pollinators so important, but the ingestion of honey was part of the sacred ritual and probably infused with plant medicines, lotus and other psychoactive, I think they're called, psychotropic, hallucinogenic, and what was being burned as incense. These were all probably contributing, and there has been some discussion around that. So you can do some research if you'd like. And it's just so interesting to me that when I look at Layne's slides, I see how many bee images there are. Coins. Another coin. Hang on. Now they are on my screen and dominating my screen. And pendants. See the bee goddesses on these pendants. These have heads of women and hands, arms of women, and bodies of bees. Another pendant, this one, Minoan. You can read at the top where they're from. These are from Layne's slides, and for the most part she wrote down where they're from, not always. And on the libation bowls as well, we see here this one, which has bees, acorns, and beech nuts. Here's your umphalos in the center of the libation bowl, and then here between the acorns on the edge. See this? Bee? I wonder if it's kind of pixelated at this point, but that's a bee right there. So it makes me so curious about what it is about bees and the buzzing of bees that was so important that they put it on their currency, on their coins. They wore them as pendants. They put them in their libation bowls. What is it about the radiant power of the heart chakra and love, which conquers all? And Layne, she's got even one of her pieces, I think it's called Radiance, or it has the word radiance in it. I have to look that up, from one of her CDs. And you know, one of her CDs, Jin was asking me, what CDs do you recommend? And I said, all of them. One of them is called Hymns from the Hive, and the backdrop of the entire soundtrack was recorded in Deborah Roberts's beehives. Deborah Roberts became Layne's best friend when Layne returned to the US after living in Brazil for a few years. Mostly, I think, to get the kind of cancer treatment she needed for her breast cancer. And she chose Asheville, North Carolina. I never really did get to ask her why. And in fact, my friend Shelley Stamback, who was my roommate at GBTO, who was hosting Layne a lot for workshops, and Shelley founded Om Sanctuary, a retreat center in Asheville. She and I have already have plans for us to co-teach there when they reopen after renovations. But Shelley was hosting Layne for a lot of workshops there, and she said, oh, you have to meet Deborah Roberts. She's a local beekeeper, bee steward, and has her own bee priestess school. And Layne and Deborah became fast friends, and that's when Layne started making all kinds of connections, more connections. She already knew there was a connection, but even more connections to the bees and the frame drum. So here's a photo that I took of a bumblebee in Rosa rugosa. Bees love flowers. And I love seeing a bee in a flower, enjoying its nectar. And in the Mediterranean part of the world, bees love pomegranate flowers. And this is a photo that Layne took of a bee in a pomegranate flower. And so then Layne started to dive into the symbolism of pomegranates. In fact, back in the day when we had a Yahoo group, and I copied and pasted the entire conversation. Layne gets on the Yahoo group and says, so tell me what you know about pomegranates. And of course, Layne's community was huge, and everybody just started adding all of what they knew and what their personal experiences were with pomegranates. And it was an amazing conversation. So there were some pomegranate stories and connections made in all of this. Here is a photo of Kore, also known as Kora, which means maiden. So when Jin said, and she brought the maiden hair turquoise, and I said, oh, well, you'll find a little bit of a maiden theme in Layne's slideshow presentation. Kora, or Kore, K-O-R-E or K-O-R-A, means maiden, and often refers to the maiden Persephone, daughter of Demeter, an earth mother goddess. And in her hand, lo and behold, is a pomegranate. This is a close-up of the same statue. And this is a pomegranate. And to tell you the truth, I've even heard that the story of Adam and Eve was not referring to an apple, like what grows in northern climes, but actually the pomegranate. And I think palm, doesn't that mean apple in some languages? Am I making that up? I'm just thinking out loud here. And granite being all of the seeds. And there's a correlation of the corn mother and corn. And if you picture a corn husk and the kernels, a correlation with pomegranate. If you look at the pomegranate now, and this part, this navel coming out, the flowering end, and the skin, and the seeds inside of it, relating somewhat to corn kernels. And so in the story of Adam and Eve, perhaps it was not a sacred apple that Eve chose for wisdom, but perhaps a pomegranate. That's my own story there that I had heard somewhere. And then here is a photo that I took while we were traveling in Oaxaca, Mexico, which is somewhat southern, in Teotitlan, Oaxaca. And this is a pomegranate tree. I'm actually looking up. Down here in the lower right corner, that's the rooftop of the building that I'm standing next to. So we see here fruits and flowers at the same time. What a prolific tree. So this would have been, really appreciated as an abundant source of food. So that was Kora, or Persephone, holding a pomegranate. And here, Layne didn't say that this was Demeter and Persephone, but I say that's what I see. Demeter on the left with her scythe, because she is of the harvest, the earth mother. She's harvesting the wheat, the grasses, and her daughter Persephone with the budding tree of spring. Down here is an umphalos, and Layne said a sacred bird. And I'm imagining that she said a sacred bird because the bird is sitting on an umphalos, and the umphalos at temple sites symbolized where sacred activities all wove together and came together. The drum, the song, the dance, the ritual, And of course, if they were outdoors, then birds would land on them, or in Bonnie's case, if birds fly inside. And these could have been open air temples, so birds were flying. They could land on an umphalos, and suddenly you have a sacred bird. But the birds sing, and to me that relates to air, and so that comes back to the heart chakra, and the umphalos is the buzzing sound of the another way of expressing the unmanifested life, all of life, and it's the humming, the buzz that we hear before there is anything. It's the sacred om or aum that when we tap into all deep, deep, deep silence, what we hear is the natural buzz of the universe, which is om or aum, which is the buzz of the umphalos, which symbolizes a breast and a belly as well, and the nipple. All feminine symbols. The navel. So the story goes that Demeter, the mother, loses her daughter Persephone. These were part of the Eleusinian mysteries, and I looked this up on Wikipedia, as well as brought in what some of the GBTO people were saying in Layne's Yahoo group. The Eleusinian mysteries were initiations that were held every year for the cult of Demeter and Persephone. Considered the most famous of the secret religious rites of ancient Greece. These mysteries represented the myth of the abduction of Persephone. She's actually abducted, taken from her mother Demeter by the king of the underworld, Hades, in a cycle that has 3 phases. The descent, which is loss. She disappears into the underworld. The search, Demeter searches the earth for her daughter. And the ascent, that resurrection into life. Think of spring, Demeter and Persephone. So Demeter being life and earth, and Persephone being the resurrection, rebirth of spring. So this is a death, resurrection, and rebirth theme in this myth, like so many of them have. And for the initiated, the rebirth of Persephone symbolized the eternity of life, a reward for afterlife. So one of my GBTO sister friends, Sintra Reeve, she was quoting what Barbara Walker said. Barbara Walker, if you're not familiar with her, is a writer and scholar about all things of the sacred feminine and ancient goddess culture. She's still alive. She lives actually in assisted living in Sarasota, Florida, right where I am. I'm part of Sarasota County. And I last saw Barbara Walker in 2018 when she was part of a women's goddess circle that was organized by my friend Fairy Layne Silver, a musician. And I was invited to play frame drum, and Barbara Walker was invited to speak. I could have listened to Barbara Walker all night, and I wish that it was all about her, but it wasn't how it was organized. She is a treasure. She has written a lot of books. So what Sintra was quoting about pomegranates and Kore or Persephone, she says, writer and goddess scholar Barbara Walker says it well. Rimmon, R-I-M-M-O-N, which is the word for pomegranate, was a biblical name of the goddess's genital shrine. So I actually keep a fake pomegranate in my office. I knew that it was a symbol of the feminine, and I believe that, you know, Eve was kind of framed in that story, and I'd like to reframe that story of Adam and Eve, but I like the idea of it being a pomegranate, and I knew that it was a symbol of fertility. Think of all the seeds of a pomegranate. But to think of part of a genital shrine of the goddess, whoa. So Rimmon, Rimmon, was from the root word rim, which means to give birth. And the pomegranate with its red juice and many seeds was a prime symbol of uterine fertility. The color of blood and the shedding of blood in the monthly moon cycle. And yeah, I remember what you said today, Bea, when we were meeting after class, that your moon cycle began. How perfect, right when we joined, right when we gathered today. Therefore, pomegranates were eaten by souls in the underworld to bring about rebirth. So they were seen as, if you ingest them, you're priming yourself for a rebirth after your death. And Hellenic mythographers said that Kore, or Persephone, was detained in the underworld because she ate pomegranate seeds while she was there. And here is an actual image of an Eleusinian scene. And I had it written somewhere of what we were looking at. I'm not seeing that now, but from what I remember, first of all, there's an umphalos right here. Down here toward the bottom, there's an umphalos. I see a libation bowl in this woman or priestess's hand. I'm thinking priestess because she's crowned. Look at all the crowns. Look at all these priestesses and priests. This to me were, you know, even though she's holding a sacred flame, the fire, it reminds me of Demeter's scythe. And these flowers really do remind me of pomegranate flowers. I'm looking at flowers in a whole new light. Layne often said that flowers, when she saw them, you know, on drums and carved in libation bowls, etc., she referred to them as lotuses, but I'm starting to look at them as well as pomegranate flowers. And I saw lots of orange flowers in the decor of a very ancient church that we visited while we were in Oaxaca. We were there for our 30th anniversary 6 years ago. And so this is a depiction of an Eleusinian scene, reenactment of Demeter and Persephone. And I know that I had the information here. It just says scene depicting Eleusinian rites and that it's Greek, but I thought that I had some text written there too. I just basically found it on, this is something that I found on Wikipedia, as well as it being one of Layne's slides. So take a look at this. A bee on a flower, right? Well, look at what I'm calling it. A bee on an umphalos of a flower. So the flower head could also be buzzing to attract the bees. And it could be buzzing because the bees are on it. It could also be buzzing because the bees are in it. This is a photo that I took while in Colonial Williamsburg last fall. So these were made, you know, for sale. But it is a remake, a replica of what would have been straw baskets, which would no longer exist if they were made in ancient times this way. But if beehives were made, you know, to attract bees, people wanted to attract the bees, they wanted the honey, they wanted to attract the bees as pollinators to their land to pollinate so that flowers would then fruit. And then they'd have more seeds to plant again. So the straw beehives wouldn't be around anymore. Some of the straw and clay beehives are and have been found in excavations. So this is kind of a remake of what that might look like. This is actually, I'm looking at what I want to share next. This is actually a photo that Layne took of Persephone with an umphalos on her head. Isn't that remarkable? And Layne took a close-up of Persephone's earrings, and she called them lotuses. They could also be pomegranate flowers, now that I'm looking at all these flower motifs a little bit differently. And you can see the flower motif here on the umphalos as well. So she's got, here we have a bee goddess with the buzzing umphalos on her head. And Layne took that photo herself, and then someone took this photo of our dear Layne in front of Persephone. Hi, Layne. Nice to see your smiling face. So Layne really got into this bee stuff big time toward the latter part of her life. And unfortunately, that was a time when I was pulling away because we had just relocated to Florida and I was broke and was unable to attend many of her workshops. So a lot of that bee priestess work that she was putting out there, I missed out on. But I'm seeing in her slides, and I did go to one of the workshops that she presented in Portland, Maine, because although I had moved to Florida, we were still going to Maine for summer work because summers were kind of dead for us here back in those days. And things have been changing, more year-round population here, but in those times we'd go back to Maine and we would work all summer. So I was able to go to a workshop that Kirsten and Tori of Inanna hosted in Portland, Maine, and I got some of this stuff. But check this one out. So this, I believe, is Anatolian because it looks so much like one of Layne's other slides. So here we see these figures with beehives on their heads. They're walking around with an umphalos on their head with the beehive. So if the buzzing of the heart chakra that we talked about today in class is the gateway from the lower, more primal needs of the lower chakras to the upper chakras, which are symbolic of our spiritual evolution. And then if our crown chakra, and yes, I know there are more chakras than that, and Sonia said after class, what about the 12 chakras? Let's keep this class going and go into the other chakras. If the 7th chakra was so expanded and the human was so evolved that it expanded into a cone-like shape, that's what's actually back here on this plate. And I don't know if all of you saw this up close. There was a class when, I think this was in the beginner series. Am I right, Emma? When Emma and I were hanging out, and maybe others were there too, and she said, what is that back there? I want to see it. I brought this back from Egypt. I could not help myself. Look at these dancing women with moons, with frame drums. And they're dancing. Look at their beautiful feet in movement and the rays of the sun above them. It's etched in copper. It's huge. It's huge. The whole bus of everyone, while we were in Egypt, everybody had to wait for me because the nice shopkeeper fellows were helping me find it because I saw a small one in the window. And I said, do you have that, but bigger? They tore apart that whole store to find this. And someone kept coming back into the store. Barbara, the bus is waiting. I said, you gotta wait. I'm not leaving until I determine whether or not they have this. And it's really remarkable. But I bring it forward because look at their crown chakras. Look at the expanded, and it was actually Kirsten who said to me, I love how their crown chakras have expanded. Well, now I'm looking at it as an umphalos. It's not just their spiritual evolution and development. Through the dance and the drum, they must be singing. They must be singing too, right? So it's also a beehive, buzzing. Imagine if their minds were so clear from their practices that all they heard was the buzz of the universe. So Layne, this stuff, it keeps branching out, doesn't it? But the threads do connect them. the heart, the buzz, the bees, the frame drum, the bees, the cone shape, the pomegranate flower, the pomegranate Persephone, the Eleusinian rites of passage of death and rebirth, all connected to the frame drum as well. Two more slides for you. This one is very moving to me. It is classical Hellenistic period, and it's from Eritrea, East Africa. It's a beehive. They were made out of straw and clay, or straw, or also just clay. And I read online when I was doing this research yesterday that they would have holes for the bees to be able to get in and out. Layne took this photo. So the holes were on, this is a lid, the lid of the clay beehive, human-made, of course, the holes so that the bees could enter and exit at will. And it's a lid so that the lid could be removed and they could reach inside to collect the honey. But what is just so moving to me is that this was used as a child's tomb. So whoever lost this child decided to bury the child in a beehive as a symbolic gesture toward hope for rebirth for their lost child. And just as the grief of Demeter, who lost her daughter to the underworld, and then there was the rebirth, here we have an actual practice of that mythology. Humans actually did that. So this is our last slide, and it is Layne's own design. She put the beehive in the center with hexagrams and bees and the word rebirth. But it's a cycle. The bees are entering and they're going around the cycle. And you see the anahata, the heart chakra symbol of the upward pointed triangle, the sacred masculine, and then the downward, if I can try to do that. Oh, look at that. Look what Zoom does. It thinks I'm giving a heart. Oh my gosh. The down, did you see that? Hearts are flying out of me. Thank you, AI. So the downward facing triangle of the sacred feminine integrated and creating the six-pointed star and the hexagram on the interior. And so Layne has the hexagrams in here. Let's see how many there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, with one in the center. So as the bees enter the cycle, we reveal. We reveal, we're excavating all of this ancient wisdom, this ancient knowledge of the ancient ones. We remember, the next word, we remember them. Picking up our drums, as Miranda Rondeau says, is an act of remembrance. We restore that part of ourselves where we feel something has been lost. And as the ancient ones in Patricia Rice's poem says, lost but not forgotten. So we're restoring those practices in a contemporary way. We're not claiming to be reenacting what was done in ancient times. In many ways, we don't really know. We don't know their rhythms. We don't know their, well, we know the words and incantations, but we don't necessarily know the music. They didn't have recording devices back then. And I don't know if there's any musical notation of the ancient world, but there are sacred texts of their incantations and of their poetry, of their chants, of their song chants. Then we are reclaiming. We're reclaiming that as our own. In this day and age of the rise of the feminine, which I see more and more in many ways, this is a reclamation, and I state that in my Daughters of an Ancient Pulse invocation. May this be a reclamation and a remembrance. We revere. So what do we revere? What do we value? You know, the sun has moved into Taurus, which is ruled by the goddess Venus, the Earth Mother herself. Taurus is earth energy at its finest, and it's all that we value: beauty and love, even monetary value. And boy, money and currency sure does take a bad rap. We have so many issues around it. Is it energy? Is it an energy exchange, or is it capitalism? We need it, but do we want it, and why, and all of that. So what do we revere in our lives? This is a good time, especially with this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction that just took place in the sign of Taurus. So the great change maker of Uranus and Jupiter, the grand benefic who expands everything, happening in this sign of the Earth Mother Goddess. What is changing? What is expanding? What are we revering? And whether you are in the southern hemisphere and you see the leaves changing into autumn and the fruition of the gardens, of the harvest, of the orchards. So, you know, let those be symbols of, you know, what we value and abundance. And if you're in the northern hemisphere and the transition is to spring, and we have blossoms everywhere, which will turn to fruits. And it's amazing. Right now where I am, we've had a very extended spring. Usually by now we're saying, oh, summer's arriving. And it's not been that way at all. It's been much cooler. The air's been much drier. Up today, there's more humidity in the air. It's been a very soft day, as I said today in class. Lots of cloud cover, kind of balminess to the air. It feels soft on the skin, but there has been so much clarity to the air, and I swear the quality of the light has changed since the moon ate the sun for that eclipse. When we had the new moon a couple of weeks ago, the quality of the light has changed. The colors are so vibrant everywhere I go. It is just amazing to me just to sit in my yard and have my breakfast. I'm blown away by the color. So can we revere all that the bounty of the earth? Can we make that what we pay reverence to, what we honor? And lastly, what we rejoice in. Can that be why we rejoice? No matter what we're going through, what changes we're going through, and what pain and loss and grief, you know, unless there is a death involved, and I mean like a real physical death, which is hugely traumatic and changes everything, there are little deaths throughout our lives too, of relationships, of Facebook pages, of career and loss of identity, which is something that happened to me back at the end of 2015 and into 2016. And I had to, you know, give birth to myself again. There's the cicada that I talked about today, coming out of the earth and into the air. So there's always something to rejoice about, because we do have a rebirth. We tend to land on all four paws, and so these challenges, unless they're just so huge that they're the heartbreak of a lifetime and our greatest fears, but you know, these other ones, not to diminish them in any way and to say that they're painful and they're difficult, but challenges can be opportunities for rebirth. And so may we find a little spark of life, of something that we can rejoice, and we can rejoice in that rebirth. So I hope that this has served you. I intended for it to not be too long, but maybe it was a little long. I love these. I love the comments that I see some of you are making as you're watching these replays and watching especially these bonus videos that are taking such a deep dive into the deeper meanings of what Layne discovered as to why we drum and the history around the drum. So I think I mentioned in class today when I was going through all of this yesterday, I came up with 59 slides that I could show you and all kinds of things that I could read to you, and it's just too much. So until we meet in person and have some kind of gathering, and every evening I give a slideshow presentation, because this is stuff that's really lighting me up right now in ways that Layne's work never did before. I just didn't have this level of appreciation and how the richness of what she was tapping into, what she was excavating and trying to give birth to the world. And so now we're all kind of left with these fragmented pieces of her excavation and put them together in our own way. When we were first given just 55 slides of her work, which was kind of the original slideshow, not the original, I've seen so many different versions of her slideshow, but it was one of the earlier versions, and she did give us some notes as to what those slides were, and you know, where they were found and what museum they were in, if they were now housed in a museum, etc., and the dates and all of that, and the cultural context. She might have said Hellenic period or whatever, Neolithic period, and then you go and you look that up in her book. This is pre-Wikipedia, pre-Google. And I remember saying, but I don't really know how to put together a slideshow. And we were having some discussions just among us friends during GBTO, those of us who purchased, we paid for Layne's slides back in the day, and one friend said she just runs the slides while she plays her frame drum. As simple as that. I wanted to give the information because there was this vital information that I thought is so informative. Yes, just seeing the images and hearing the frame drum is transformational. And also just having the knowledge of what these were and what Layne was seeing in them, I just think is so valuable. So what I'm doing now is I'm just piecing it together based on things I remember her saying. There are some videos. There's still that slideshow lecture that I downloaded from her Dropbox soon after she passed, and I posted it. Remember, I mentioned this before. I posted it to YouTube on my channel under the playlist called Layne Redmond, and it's a 75-minute slideshow lecture. The sound isn't great, so maybe you need to wear earbuds or headphones or just turn up your volume. I apologize for that. I should have downloaded it into iMovie and adjusted the audio, but I was so excited that I had it and that I could actually premiere it on the anniversary of Layne's passing, which was actually the 10th anniversary of her passing, October 2023. So this past October, I premiered it, and I was just too excited, and I brought it forward. But that is there if you wanted to. It's not easy to follow because she's putting all of these, she goes even deeper into more of this stuff, and the Brahmari and the bee goddess, and then what the Yantra, or the physical depiction of the chant, the mantra is for the bee goddess, all this stuff. She just goes, it's endless, it's a web. And you can get lost in that web. So if that interests you, maybe I'll put a link to that. I know that I'm sending you, I already promised 2 links that I'm sending you, and I mentioned it in our opening today. They are in my notes, so remind me if I forget. But there are 2 things that I wanted to send you. The words to the song From a Distance, and if I can find Nancy Griffith singing it, that's my favorite version. A song written by Julie Gold. So in our magic flying carpet ride today, when we looked up from a distance, the world looks blue and green, and the snow-capped mountains white. From a distance, the ocean meets the stream, and the eagle takes to flight. From a distance, it goes on and on. It's basically, from a distance, it's all just beautiful, and it's peaceful, and it's loving, and it's kind, and it's in harmony, and it's in balance. I hope you can hear me. I just realized I did not bring the mic down. And I'm remembering Bee brought her stuffed eagle today for what she shared, for her air energy. And then the second link I'm going to send you is, peace. There go the balloons. Peace, y'all. Peace and love. May the hearts, there they go. Yes, invoking Aphrodite, goddess of love. And she is an early version of Venus. And like I said, the sun is now in Taurus, ruled by Venus, where this conjunction of Jupiter and Uranus just happened. And we're still in that conjunction. These outer planets, it's not just a one-day event. It's like, and we're now in a 14-year cycle. So what will this bring to us? Collectively and individually, because remember in what I read that we are part of the web, we are of it, we are in it, and we are it. So anyway, the second video is like a 4-minute video of Layne talking while she's just seated on a hiking trail at Topanga Canyon. And a filmmaker was just filming Layne talking while she's sitting there with her old bodhrán. It's such an old drum that she was still playing, still sounded great. And she's got her eyes closed most of the time, like she's just channeling. And she's in such a lucid, relaxed state, which is not typical of Layne. But she was seated by all of this wild rosemary, which was in full bloom, and the bees were buzzing all around. The bees were landing on the microphones, and so sometimes you don't even hear Layne's words, you just hear the bee buzz. And Layne was totally mesmerized by the buzzing of the bees. She was just so connected to that primordial Om, and it put her into an altered state. And she was saying, I don't know that she was saying anything totally new. There might be one or two little aha moments in there for you, but you gotta just hear it from the words of Layne herself. And if I remember, I'll send you a link also to that 75-minute lecture if you haven't seen it. And that'll always be up on YouTube. That one is just there on YouTube. All right, closing for now. See you next Sunday in our final class number 6. And there's the hexagram. There's the 6, the 2 3s. Wow. So the magic number of 6 for spirit of the drum. And who knows what the spirit of the drum will bring us in the coming week until we meet again in the circle on the tambourine path. Love to you all. Mwah. Have a wonderful week. Thank you for being here. Whenever you watch this, thank you for being here. Leave a comment below. Let us know that you were here and any aha moments that you had, or what you like about it, or if something sparked an interest and inspiration for you to then go Googling. Let us know what you find out. All right? Until next time, bye for now.